I used to think rock bottom was just an expression, something people said when things got bad. Losing a job, a breakup, maybe sleeping in your car for a few nights. But real rock bottom? It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It creeps. It pulls your ribs in from the inside out until even breathing feels like debt. I was 26, living in a crumbling studio apartment in the back of a rundown building in Rochester, New York. I had dropped out of college 2 years earlier when my mom got sick, and I had to pick up double shifts at the mechanic shop. She passed away a year after that. I stayed in the city, mostly because leaving felt like failing her all over again. Rent was $950. Doesn't sound like much, unless you're making barely minimum wage and your boss keeps cutting hours without warning. I was already behind 1 month, then 2. By the 3rd, the eviction notice came, slapped on my door like a red-lettered scarlet letter. And with it came Mr. Carver, my landlord. He wasn't a bad guy. That's what made it worse. He was polite, firm wore a tie even when he didn't need to, spoke like someone who'd once worked in real estate but gave up on people a long time ago. That day he came to my door, I knew I didn't have it. "Mr. Holden," he said, voice low. "This can't continue." I nodded. "You've had more than enough time to settle this." I swallowed. "I just need 1 more week." He sighed. "You've said that twice." I looked down at the floor. My shoes were worn. The carpet was stained. My dignity was buried somewhere under all that. "I'm not trying to be cruel," he added, "but I have rules." I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was shame, maybe anger, maybe the slow erosion of whatever decency I had left. But something inside me snapped. When he turned to leave, I followed him down the hallway. The old stairs creaked under our weight. I asked if we could talk outside. He agreed. Behind the building, where the dumpsters rotted and weeds curled through cracked pavement, I reached into my coat pocket. I had found the wrench earlier that morning, forgotten behind a loose pipe. It was heavy, cold, fit perfectly in my palm. I don't remember lifting it. I don't remember the sound, just the silence that came after. He dropped, fast. His head hit the concrete with a dull, final sound. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around. No one, not a single soul. The alley was still. Only the buzz of a faulty streetlight above us. Panic didn't come like a wave. It came like a whisper. Move. Now I dragged his body behind the dumpster. My arms shook. I couldn't believe what I had done. I kept telling myself it wasn't real, that he'd get up, that maybe it wasn't fatal. But the blood, God, the blood wasn't something you could argue with. I ran upstairs, locked the door, pushed my dresser in front of it. I sat on the floor for hours just staring at my hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. By midnight, I cleaned myself up, washed my clothes, scrubbed the bathroom sink 3 times even though I hadn't touched it. I kept expecting a knock, sirens, something, but nothing came. The next morning, I woke up thinking it had been a dream. Until I saw the red smudge on my coat collar, it had happened, and now I had to live with it. I spent the next 2 days researching how to move a body, how long decomposition takes, what cameras might have been nearby. I watched videos, read articles. Every Google search felt like a confession, but no one came. The world kept spinning. And I started lying to myself. I told myself he pushed me, that he threatened me, that he laughed when I begged, that it was self-defense. But I knew, deep down I knew, I killed a man because I didn't want to be homeless. Not noble, not justifiable, just weak, cowardly, human. On the 4th day, the building was quiet, too quiet. I avoided the back alley, I avoided people, I avoided mirrors. Then, someone knocked. My stomach dropped. I opened the door. It wasn't the police, it was Mrs. Flanders, the old woman from the third floor. She held a casserole dish. I hadn't seen Mr. Carver around, she said, squinting. Thought maybe he was sick. You know how he always checked in on us. I nodded slowly. I think he went out of town. She smiled. Well, this is for you, dear. You look thin. She left before I could say anything. I stared at the casserole dish in my hands like it might explode. People were already asking. They noticed. The clock had started ticking. You can clean your clothes, your shoes, your floor, but you can't clean your soul. I spent the next few days living like a man in hiding. I barely slept. I didn't shower. I kept the curtains shut even though sunlight never helped me before anyway. Every creak of the floor above, every siren blocks away. I thought it was for me. My stomach clenched every time I heard a knock, even if it was just the UPS guy next door. Mr. Carver's body was still behind the dumpster. That fact lived in my brain like a scream I couldn't mute. I kept telling myself to move it, to bury it, to do something, but I was frozen. Fear made me its puppet. I thought about calling 911 and turning myself in at least 100 times. I rehearsed what I'd say, but then I'd look at the wall, at the cracked ceiling and tell myself, just one more day, let me figure it out. On the 5th night, the smell started. It wasn't strong yet, but it was wrong, thick, sweet and metallic the way something dead shouldn't be. I lit incense, sprayed Febreze around my window, but I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. I waited until 2 a.m., pulled on gloves, a hoodie, a face mask. I grabbed a tarp and rope I'd bought from the hardware store using cash, paid with shaking hands and forced small talk. My mind screamed the whole time, he knows, he knows, he knows what you did. But no one said anything. People don't look closely when you look like you're crumbling. That night, I crept into the alley. The street light above flickered like something out of a horror film. I peeked behind the dumpster, and there he was, rigid, pale, like a mannequin left in the rain. I vomited, quietly, into the weeds. Then I got to work. The tarp was too small, the rope frayed. His body was heavier than I remembered. I dragged him half-covered across cracked asphalt, panting like I'd run 10 miles. My arms burned, my back screamed. I wanted to lie down and disappear into the dark. I didn't even have a plan. Where do you take a body at 2:30 a.m. in a dying neighborhood with one gas station and no woods for miles? I put him in the trunk. My car was an old 2001 sedan, rusted and barely legal, but it ran. And that night, it carried a secret in the back. I drove for an hour, out past the county line, past strip malls and farmland and sleepy diners with neon lights that felt like judgment. I didn't know where I was going until I saw the bridge. It wasn't much, a small overpass above a dried-out canal. No cameras, no houses nearby, just silence. I stopped the car, dragged him out. My hands shook, my knees buckled, but I managed to roll him over the edge. It didn't splash, just a dull thud in the dry brush. I stood there, chest heaving, staring down into the darkness. Then I drove home. I took 3 showers. I scrubbed my hands until my skin peeled. I threw the gloves in a storm drain 6 blocks away. I lit every candle I owned, trying to make the apartment smell like anything other than what I had become. The next morning there was a knock. Again, I nearly collapsed. It was the mailman, just the fussing mailman. He handed me a letter, no return address, inside a single sheet of paper. You were seen. No signature, no explanation, just those 3 words. My lungs collapsed, my hands trembled, My mind sprinted through every possible scenario. Who? Mrs. Flanders? A kid in a window? A camera I hadn't noticed? I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I started seeing things. Mr. Carver's face in my mirror, his blood on my hands no matter how much I scrubbed. I thought I heard footsteps behind me in the hall. I started muttering to myself, whispering apologies into the air. I even tried to pray, but I couldn't remember how. I stopped going to work. My boss texted, then called, then stopped. I think he thought I OD'd or skipped town. Either way, no one came looking. Days passed. I didn't eat. I barely drank water. My clothes sagged. My eyes went hollow. And still, I clung to the hope that maybe this would go away. That maybe the note was a prank, a fluke, that maybe no one really saw, until I saw her again, Mrs. Flanders. She stood in the hall, her eyes sharper than before. "You look worse every day," she said. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Whatever it is, you should confess." I froze. "Confess what?" She smiled. "Guilt isn't quiet, dear. It's loud, and it leaks." Then she walked away. That night, I knew I couldn't keep this up. The silence was getting louder. The ghosts were growing stronger. The weight of what I'd done was no longer something I could carry. And for the first time since it all began, I wanted to be caught. You think the hardest part is the act itself, but it's not. The hardest part is waking up every day after, still breathing, still eating, still walking through a world that feels too bright, too loud, too undeserved. I stopped leaving my apartment. The blinds stayed closed, the dishes piled up. I showered once every 4 or 5 days, just long enough to not smell like death. My reflection became a stranger. Hollow eyes, dry lips, skin pale and gray. I looked like the crime I committed. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes I'd hear whispers outside my door. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all, and that was worse. I started seeing Mr. Carver. At first, it was just a flicker. Someone standing at the edge of my vision when I turned too fast. Then shadows in the corners of the room that didn't move with the sun. Then it was his voice. Software, just barely there. Still pretending. Does it feel better now? You thought this would save you? I answered him once, out loud. I sat on the floor and whispered, "I didn't mean to." But even I didn't believe it anymore. I kept the note, "You were seen." I taped it to the inside of my kitchen cabinet. Every time I opened it to grab a can of soup or instant noodles, it stared back at me like a jury that never adjourned. I started dreaming of my mother. It wasn't comforting. In the dreams, she was sick again, lying in that hospital bed, bones pressing through paper-thin skin. She didn't speak, just looked at me with sad, endless eyes. Her silence was louder than Mr. Carver's accusations. Sometimes in the dreams, she'd open her mouth, and black water would pour out. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, whispering her name like she could save me now. She couldn't. I kept trying to write a confession, on paper, on my laptop, even on my phone. I'd type or scribble a few sentences. I killed a man. It wasn't premeditated. I was afraid. I snapped. Then delete them, tear them up, throw them away. I wasn't ready to be honest. Not really, not yet. But something had shifted. I stopped locking my door. Not because I felt safe, because I didn't care anymore. Let them come. Let them find me sleeping in my guilt. Let the walls collapse. I didn't deserve the protection. One night, I wandered down to the lobby for the first time in weeks. It was nearly midnight. No one was around. The vending machine buzzed like it had a secret. I stood there for a long time, staring at rows of candy bars and stale chips, not knowing what I even wanted. Then I heard her. Back among the living, huh, Mrs. Flanders? She sat in a chair near the mailboxes, knitting, at midnight. I couldn't sleep, I said. Most guilty people can't. I froze. What do you mean? She didn't look up. You think I don't know what guilt smells like? I was married to a man who came back from Vietnam and never looked me in the eyes again. I said nothing. I don't know what you did, she said, but I know it's eating you alive. My throat tightened. What if someone did something terrible but didn't mean to? She set her needles down, looked at me for a long time. Intent matters, she said. But it's not everything. You still carry it. You still owe something to the world. I nodded slowly, then she added, but mostly you owe it to yourself. I went back upstairs and cried for the first time in months. Not loud, not dramatic, just slow tears that felt like they'd waited too long to fall. The next day I cleaned. Really cleaned. I opened the windows, let the air in, scrubbed the kitchen tile, threw out the rotting food, washed the blood-stained coat I had stuffed in the back of my closet. I shaved. I even took a walk around the block. People looked at me like they'd seen a ghost. Maybe they had, because I felt like one. Still, I wasn't ready. I wasn't there yet, but I was close. I knew I had one more thing to do before I could confess. I had to go back to the place where I dumped him, the overpass. I didn't know why. Closure, maybe, or punishment. Or maybe I wanted to hear him one last time. So I drove. The bridge looked the same, abandoned, silent. I parked, walked to the edge, looked down. He wasn't there. The weeds had grown. Nature had already started to reclaim what I destroyed. I sat on the edge for over an hour, just breathing, watching the sun rise like it didn't care who I was or what I'd done. And then I made my decision. Not because I wanted redemption, not because I thought the world would forgive me, but because the silence was finally unbearable, and because ghosts deserve rest, even mine. I didn't sleep the night before. Not that I had been sleeping much anyway, but that night was different. There was no panic, no racing heartbeat or imaginary footsteps in the hallway, just silence. Heavy, still, suffocating, like the pause before a storm or the inhale before a confession. I sat at my kitchen table until the sun came up. No coffee, no food, just me, the cracked ceiling, and the truth I'd been avoiding for too long. The truth was simple. I killed a man. I buried him in lies. And now I had to dig it all back up. At 8:17 a.m., I put on clean clothes for the first time in weeks. Washed, ironed, even put on deodorant. It felt pointless, but necessary, like dressing up for your own execution. I wrote a short note, left it on the table. I'm going to the police. His name was Richard Carver. I did it. No dramatic explanations, no sob story, just the facts. Outside, the morning was bright and warm. Birds chirped. A breeze danced through the trees like nothing in the world had gone wrong. I almost hated it for that, for moving forward so easily. The police station was 12 blocks away. I walked. People passed me. Mothers with strollers, students with earbuds, an old man walking a dog. None of them knew. None of them looked. I was invisible, just another nobody in a city full of them. But inside, everything screamed. I reached the station by 9:02. It was small, square, unimpressive, like a DMV with bulletproof glass. I stood at the front desk for a minute, unsure what to say. The officer behind the glass looked up. "Can I help you?" I nodded. "I need to confess to a crime." That sentence. I had rehearsed it 100 times. Still, saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. His eyebrows lifted. "What kind of crime?" "Murder," he blinked. "Excuse me?" I killed my landlord. His name was Richard Carver. It happened 3 weeks ago. The room slowed. In less than a minute, I was seated in a back room. Not in handcuffs yet, but with 2 detectives across from me. They asked me to start from the beginning. I did. No lies, no deflection. I told them about the overdue rent, the wrench, the alley, the tarp, the canal. I told them about the note, "You were seen," and how I thought I was being watched. I told them about the guilt, the visions, the way I couldn't breathe anymore. They didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, one of them asked quietly, "Why come forward now?" I looked him in the eye. Because I'm already serving the sentence. I just want it to be official. They booked me. The handcuffs were cold, but not cruel. The holding cell was smaller than I expected. White walls, metal bench, a toilet with no lid. There was a buzzing light overhead that never turned off. I sat on the bench and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. The news came fast. Local outlets ran the headline, "Tenant confesses to landlord's murder after weeks in hiding." I wasn't named at first. Then they found my photo, my social media, and the comments began. Some called me a monster. Some said I looked too normal. Some blamed poverty. Some blamed mental illness. Some didn't care at all. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. I wasn't proud, but I was clean. And in that tiny, sterile cell, I felt peace. The trial didn't happen right away. Of course not. The system is slow. I was assigned a public defender named Harris, mid-30s, tired eyes, but kind. He told me I'd probably get second-degree murder, maybe manslaughter if the plea went through, 20 to life. I told him I wasn't fighting it. He looked at me for a long time. "That's rare," he said. "I'm tired," I replied. A few days later, Mrs. Flanders visited. She didn't come inside, just stood on the other side of the glass during visitation hours. She picked up the phone. I did the same. "You look better," she said. I smiled. "I feel lighter," she nodded. "Confession does that." "I didn't think I'd see you again. I just wanted to tell you, you did the right thing. Most people die without ever doing that." I didn't cry, but I came close. "I'm sorry," I said, "for everything." "You're human," she said. "That's punishment enough." She left without saying goodbye. Weeks passed, then months. I got moved to county jail. The food was bad, the air was stale, but I found a rhythm. Reading, writing, sometimes praying. I started writing letters to no one, just pages and pages of thoughts. I don't know if anyone will ever read them. Maybe that's not the point. In one of them, I wrote, "I used to believe monsters were born, but now I know they're made out of fear, out of shame, out of silence. But they don't have to stay that way. Sometimes at night, I still see Mr. Carver in my dreams. But now he just sits across from me, silent, watching, and I can look him in the eye.